We're speaking today with Wendy Manning. She's a family demographer in the Sociology Department at Bowling Green State University. She also co-directs the National Center for Family and Marriage Research. It's great to have you on. You know, we've been talking about the University of Texas at Austin sociologist Mark Regnerus, who has gained significant notoriety after publishing a journal article which claims that children of same-sex parents don't do as well, don't have that ideal outcomes in life, which was controversial because it ran contrary to many studies that preceded it. So let's start at the very beginning if we can. What was the basis and what were the parameters of this study that was done?
I think I wasn't part of the original study, so I can't speak to the motivations for why they did it, but I think their goal was to try to capture a wide range of family experiences and try to assess different indicators of well-being. And they wanted to capture a large sample was a goal of theirs. A lot of the prior work had been based on smaller samples, and so they wanted to contribute to the field by collecting a large sample that would be nationally representative.
So who did the study talk to? What were the questions that were asked, or how was data gathered about the families, about what determines whether a child is in a so-called same-sex household, and how is that all done?
So basically they talked to adults who were 18 to 39 years old and asked them about their family experiences. And that's a fairly traditional way to study family life and childhood family experiences. But rather than asking a question such as, have you ever lived with a same-sex parent? Is your parent lesbian or gay? They really asked if your parent had ever had a sexual or romantic relationship with someone of the same sex. And to my knowledge, is the first time that approach has been used to determine the family circumstances of children. And as you can imagine, children aren't privy to all of their parents' sexual or romantic experiences. And so this is a sort of unusual way to capture children's living circumstances. And at the same time, he never really established in the first study whether the respondent had ever lived in this kind of family. He just said you were from a gay or lesbian parent family if your parent had had sex or a romantic relationship with someone of the same sex.
So let's talk a little bit about the numbers. We hear so much about this sample size of 3,000, and many of the advocates who say this study is absolutely accurate in saying that that children raised by same-sex parents don't do as well. But when you actually look at it, is it not true that all but 2 of those children came from households that were led by opposite-sex couples, if we are actually to look to break down those so-called 3,000 examples?
Well, I think I've heard a lot of different numbers thrown around, and the 2 is really a different number. I think the number that's, it seemed like maybe about 85 members of this sample had lived with a lesbian, had lived with their mother and her same-sex partner, so you might call that a lesbian mother family. It seems as if that is true. In his initial report that received a lot of publicity, he did not distinguish that, but then he was asked, there was a fair amount of critique of his study, and then he reanalyzed the data and came up with that. The 2 represent 2 children who were raised from birth until age 18 in a lesbian mother family. And so, and why that is important is that his contrast group are children who were raised in stable, married, different sex families. And so if you want to make similar comparisons, you can say, well, how do those kids fare compared to the 2 children who were raised in stable lesbian mother families? So that's where the 2 comes from.
So it would seem to me, and this is your area of expertise, not mine, so I ask this to you as an expert in this field.
Yeah.
If you were going to compare if you want to really compare apples to apples, it would seem that you would need to compare the results of children raised until age 18 and from birth to age 18 in an opposite sex household with parents that are either have been together or separate the entire time, and the same circumstances from those in same-sex families, because otherwise I don't think you can really distinguish the effect of being in a same-sex household versus being in a household with divorced parents, which we know has an impact on development.
Right. I think your assessment is on target, and traditionally that's how we would do it. We would either look at children who were all from stable parent families, or we would include a variable in the analysis that indicated whether or not children had experienced the dissolution of their parents' relationship, or had been, if we would have other indicators of family instability. And he seemed to really want to compare and make this firm contrast to the two biological stable parent families, but he didn't hold the same-sex families to the same standard. So it's hard to assess the findings. I mean, you also have to realize that a lot of children in same-sex parent families are the children of dissolved heterosexual relationships. So some children are adopted from birth. Some are adopted as preschoolers or even as adolescents into same-sex parent families. And then you have the children whose parents had maybe been together, biological parents are no longer together, but now they're being raised by a same-sex parent family. So there's a lot of pathways into same-sex parent families.
Right, that's the other issue. To say that you were raised in a same-sex household doesn't address whether one of those parents is the biological parent that was previously in an opposite sex relationship parenting that child, if the child was adopted into a family where neither of the parents is a biological parent. I think most of our audience understands the flaws with this. What I would be interested in hearing from you is that every week or every other week I get emails from those who are basically praying at the altar of Mark Regnerus when it comes to this study. And they tell me that the consensus from the sociological community is that this is a valid study that confirms it is worse for children to be raised in same-sex households. Where is that idea coming from? Is there any validity to that consensus in the sociological community?
There is, to my knowledge, no consensus. The American Sociological Association has prepared a brief, and I worked on that brief, and any researchers who study family, the sociology of family, and this is squarely where this work falls, do not agree with his assessment. We all have, there's always shortcomings with any research project, and as authors, we need to take responsibility for that and recognize the limitations. And in his own paper, he says that this paper cannot be used for the purposes that it has been used. He recognizes the flaws, but seems to be carrying forward anyway. So the consensus is not, and I would say using his own words from the study, he does not believe this study should be used to make policy about children in same-sex parent families.
So is it fair to say that the research, the importance of the research and the significance of the research is actually being taken by some even beyond where Mark Regnerus himself says the study should be used? Yes, I agree. I mean, Mark Regnerus has made public statements. He's appeared in court cases. He was an expert witness in the Michigan case. So he seems to believe that his findings can be used for the purposes that the research community disagrees with, and in his own paper he says they shouldn't be used for. So I think he's taking his findings beyond the scope of the work and the data that's possible. We've been speaking with Wendy Manning from the Sociology Department at Bowling Green State University, also co-director of the National Center for Family and Marriage Research. Really a pleasure having you on. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.